Places you want to avoid are deep pools, slow moving. If you consider the fact they need to swim into the bottom, into the substrate, anything that's impenetrable, say it's ledge, and there are places, especially on Smith Brook, where it's ledgy. They can't get into the bottom, so skip it. Or if it's really, really sandy, they can't dig into the sand. So you just skip those areas altogether. One adult female salmon will lay about 800 eggs per pound of body weight. And typically they weigh in the range of like 10 pounds. So that's 8,000 eggs for one female. She's gonna go upstream, she's gonna dig a red in a gravelly, cobbly bottom, and she's gonna deposit 8,000 eggs in one spot. And as you can imagine, that becomes a focal point for predators, both terrestrial, avian, and aquatic. I mean, there's a lot of things that eat these fish. So when they're in a huge concentration like that, their mortality is very high. That's Mother Nature's way. That's why they have 8,000 eggs. But because we're doing a restoration project, because there hasn't been salmon in these rivers for almost 200 years, we need to make sure that we have the best survival possible. So we're spreading them out so that they're not a focal point for predators.
The stock salmon live in freshwater for usually 2 years, and they reach a size of 6 or 7 inches and then head to the ocean. And getting past the dams is not a major problem. Here at Townsend, they've installed a plunge pool at the base of the dam, and they just go over it like a natural waterfall. It's not a problem. At Ball Mountain, they keep the pool behind the dam at a lower level like they do in the winter anyway, during the time the smolts are migrating, so they're able to get out of Ball Mountain. So getting out to the ocean isn't a major problem. When they come back and migrate upstream as adults, they can't get by large dams like here at Townsend and Ball Mountain. So the Corps of Engineers has built this trap and truck facility. And in the plan in the future, when adult run sizes are large enough, that fish, in addition to just being trucked above Townsend, which they are now, will also be trucked above Ball Mountain and above the Londonderry and Weston dams further upstream. Unfortunately, the year that there were a lot of salmon here was the year it was destroyed by a flood, and they weren't able to use it that year. And since then, just by random luck or bad luck, not many fish have come into the West River. So there's only been a handful of fish that have been transported upstream. One of them was a 19-pounder that ended up going up Ball Mountain Brook several years ago, but there's only been several. The juvenile salmon do very well in fresh water, and the difficult thing in the past has been getting them by the hydro dams on the main stem of the Connecticut and out to the ocean, and then more recently the difficulties with marine survival. So based on what they do in the river, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism if we can continue to make progress on downstream passage and if marine survival comes up a little bit.
The salmon restoration effort is becoming everybody's sort of favorite whipping child because the number of salmon that have come back into the watershed have been low. The thing I like to point out to people, and the thing I claim to people, is that it's not the Atlantic salmon, it's the river. And it's the investment in improving the quality of the river and the habitat access in the river. This past year, 156,000 shad were lifted over the Holyoke Dam down in Massachusetts. Okay, only 230 salmon, but 156,000 American shad. There were no shad here 25 years ago, 30 years ago. There were no shad. And so the Atlantic Salmon Restoration Program has restored American shad to most of its historic range. I have been a professional fly fishing guide for 24 years, and I probably do 10, 12 days a year somewhere in the West River watershed. The other thing that the river welcomes are canoe, kayak, tubing has started to show up on the river. You can see osprey, you can see the herons, shorebirds. Just to the east of here on Putney Mountain, the hawk watching has started for the year as the hawks move south. And on a really good day, you can see 100 birds moving across that edge of the Green Mountains. So birding, canoeing, kayaking, tubing, fishing, just hanging out, swimming. The local Watershed Association does ongoing monitoring we know that the water quality is high in the West River.
One of the things that we at Bonnievale used to test for, and that the West River Watershed Alliance team of citizen volunteers tests for currently, is E. coli, the presence of E. coli in the river. And E. coli is a bacteria found in the intestinal tract of mammals. In large concentrations, E. coli can be harmful to people. E. coli would get into the river generally from farm runoff. And what we've found is that for the most part, this lower section of the river is not free from E. coli, but free from harmful levels of E. coli, except for after storm events. Whenever it rains really hard, you have to imagine the river is receiving waters from the lands in an enormous area around it. So water's coming down all these little tributaries, washing off people's lawns, washing out of farms, washing over failed septic systems, washing into the larger body of the West River. And so right after storm events, you're going to find, during the storm event, if you tested for E. coli, you're going to find higher levels. The next day, the levels will remain high. And then the day after, you'll see them start to descend. And that's just very typical of all rivers, even clean rivers where people swim a lot. Even during storm events, our areas on the river where we do have the higher E. coli that we've tested, they're not super, super, super high, even then. So that's really good news for the West River. And it largely has to do with the fact that we don't have lots and lots of farmland contributing a lot of manure runoff.
The West River Watershed Alliance was formed in about 1997 to begin to look at it was formed by a number of different stakeholders. It was really a coalition to look at what things might be affecting the health of the West River, and to really sort of function as a steward for the West River and for the watershed. And we're in a sort of a special position in Vermont because many of our waterways are pretty pristine. I mean, they're all mostly swimmable. People are taking fish out of the waterways, and in terms of the health of most of the rivers in the country, that's quite rare. And so part of the West River Watershed Alliance's role is to really maintain that and protect that, and to continue to help the rivers be even cleaner than they are.
We've got 19 swimming hole sites that we do on the West River, the Weems River, and the Saxtons River, and the Rock River. Between that, we've got about 25 volunteers between spouses and teams. We try to encourage team sampling. Handling samples in general by yourself can be a little bit complicated because you've constantly got to walk back to shore. So if you have a team, it makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to start by doing the pH and conductivity testing. When we start tabulating all this data for the report, we can see trends, we can see what sites have higher levels of pH and conductivity throughout the summer, and what might have caused a spike if there was one, and then how that reflects on the E. coli levels, the nitrate levels, the phosphorus, and the other things that we test for. It's nice to have a range of people that have been involved in this. And it is definitely a range. We've got people like Darlene who have worked with and run volunteer programs in the area, monitoring and policing and enforcing and advocating. Then we've got people just with an abundance of local knowledge and an earnest interest in their river, like the Toppitzers, who live right on it and have always taken an interest in it because of its raw beauty and their passion for it. And then we have the BUHS students, and they're just absolutely fascinated by the whole process. And it's really been wonderful working with them and actually seeing that the entire generation is not as complacent as you'd like to think it would be.
We basically asked for an appropriation of some of the tax money to go to the organization to assist with the water quality monitoring. So we brought it in front of, I think, 9 towns, and they were voted on at town meeting and pretty unanimously positively voted on. What I found in the town meetings I attended was that people are really concerned about the environment, and they're really concerned about the waterways, and they really want you to go after people that are acting irresponsibly or, help solve the problem.
If the citizens can't make a change in a town, if they can't bring about a change to search for a failed septic system, the state will look at citizens groups' data and use any red flags to cause their own investigations to bring about. So we would say, look, come down here and check this out. We've been monitoring this. We think there's a problem, and the state will pay attention to that.
The West River now has a basin planner who is working on creating a basin plan for the West River watershed. And that plan, along with documenting the history of the river and the land around the river and the quality of the river, will also identify existing problems. But along with identifying the problems, it will also identify how to address those problems and which organization or which people should take responsibility for addressing those problems. So there are a lot of good things going on in this watershed.
Clean water. What would we do without it? We wouldn't be able to swim. We wouldn't have nearly as much wildlife as we do around here. We wouldn't have this beauty that fills our souls. We wouldn't want to live in a place where the river's catching fire like rivers did in the late 60s.
When we go further north in this continent, in Canada, all the streams are drinkable. To Americans who live in the United States, drinking water out of the stream is a foreign concept. Water is becoming a commodity, it's becoming for sale. It's a dangerous thing. For the water is something that the God gave us. We all have right to our water and responsibility towards it. There's no reason why the water in the streams should not be drinkable water. No, my message to students is always a positive message. We are growing human beings. When you grow, you make mistakes. And then the whole thing, you see your mistakes and you do better. And to this new generation of people, I'm very positive and I'm optimistic that they're going to turn this around. That this river is going to flow free. For sure, it's just a matter of time. And we need to be patient. Because when we get impatient, we make even more mistakes.
Yeah, I guess I would just want to emphasize for people in this area to really not take for granted the beautiful resource that they have. And also the sense of identity that our rivers give us. And a lot of the sort of an inherent quality of why people are how they are is based on the land and the water that surrounds them.
If the quality of the water and the outdoor activities on the river were to decline, that word would get out. The reputation of the river is the reputation of this valley. This valley is known as the West River Valley, and the communities along here identify themselves with the river. If the river were less than high quality, then isn't that a statement about the rest of the things going on in the valley?